Why is every one of the Walking Dead games so trash?
Oh, you're, urban?
Starting with the first season of Telltale's The Walking Dead. Now I have to be honest and say out of all these Walking Dead games, this one is my personal favorite. And honestly, it has a better story than both the comics and the TV show. But when judging it as a video game, I still say it's fair to say that this game is pretty bad. But the story ends up following this man on his way to prison named Lee Everett. Only thing is he's heading to prison at the same time the Walker virus kicks in. So he ends up getting in an accident that lets him escape the back of the cop car. And he ends up finding this little girl named Clementine. And the rest of the game is basically about the adventures and mishaps the two go through while he tries to take care of her. And it definitely ends up hitting all your Walking Dead story beats, like the extremely badass redneck character,
She's United States Air Force. Fuck you and her.
story arc involving cannibals, and one of the main character's children getting bit. But ultimately, the real reason everyone loves this game so much is the relationship between Lee and Clementine. They have this really great dynamic, that of a father and daughter. It really humanizes Lee as a character and gives the player an opportunity to see that you are not defined by the worst things you do. Another plus that really sticks out in season 1 of this game to me is Kenny, and he's the Daryl type of character the game gives you, and he's honestly pretty great. The only real complaints I have for the story is that at sometimes it did get kinda boring, but ultimately the way everything pans out from start to finish is honestly very memorable. Now as for the real gripe I have with this game, it's the gameplay, because there basically isn't any. Like most other Telltale games, the only thing you can really do in the Walking Dead series is choose what your character says. While that does sometimes lead to some fun mishaps and experiences that feel like you are deciding the outcome of the game, 9 times out of 10, regardless of the option you choose, everything ends up going the same exact way. So expect most of your playthroughs to feel kind of linear and they won't really change anything. But honestly, that ending still gets me every single time. Leading us to the next game on the list, Survival Instinct. Now this game was supposed to be a prequel to the TV show that revolves around Daryl, what he was doing before he met up with the Atlanta group. But honestly, this game is pretty much dog ass. Sure, there's more gameplay to it than the Telltale games, and the gunplay in this one isn't terrible, but the melee mechanics and the graphics are so clunky that they basically ruin the entire game. I will say that it is a step in the better direction, but with the mediocre gameplay and the lack of a memorable story, this is one of the worst Walking Dead games. Then right after that, we got The Walking Dead 400 Days, another Telltale Walking Dead game that takes place 400 days into the apocalypse. One thing I really love about this game is how the characters we meet and they connect over into season 2. But to be completely honest, it's not like they really do too much in that game, and instead they're delegated to being background characters, whose fates are ultimately left unknown. But this DLC was definitely good for its time. Leading on from there, we go into the Walking Dead game that most consider to be the absolute best, The Walking Dead Season 2. Now don't expect there to be much changes on the gameplay side of things, but I'd say this is probably where the story begins to hit its peak, especially with Clementine and the character development she faces here.
Whose baby is it?
Then spoiler alert, this game pretty much sees her traveling on her own. I have to be real with you and say I did enjoy seeing this wonderful little girl turn into an absolute killing machine. But the new group she meets here is pretty terrible. Not only were they willing to leave her in a cabin overnight to die, basically all of them in some way are either liars, cheaters, or thieves. Just not the kind of people you want to be stuck in a zombie apocalypse with. Some of the story high points of this game are the return of Kenny and the birth of our new baby character AJ. And remember that, because it's gonna come back later. Then from there we have The Walking Dead Michonne, and here is where the Telltale Walking Dead games start to get kinda mid. Granted, this is the only game in the entire franchise I haven't played through fully, cause I got too bored. But essentially it follows Michonne while she's on this island or something? I don't know, man, it's pretty forgettable. And keep in mind, this is coming from someone who is absolutely obsessed with Michonne. Like, she's in my top 3 favorite characters. And this game is supposed to be canon to the comic storyline, but it never really comes back there either. Leading us to the next Telltale game in the storyline, The Walking Dead, A New Frontier. And this game chooses to make a very polarizing decision that definitely separated the fan base, where instead of directly continuing on with the story of Clementine, we instead follow some completely random character, one of them being Javier, where on their journey for survival, they end up randomly coming across Clementine. And I won't lie, this game does have its moment, and the gameplay quality here has definitely increased, but I can say this is the first Telltale game that truly made me realize that none of our choices here mean shit, considering that none of the extremely different endings you choose in the end of season 2 branch off to their own individual choices or even add up to anything here. No matter what you do in this game, it all ends the same way. And once I started to notice this, the franchise that promotes itself upon the players being able to choose what happens in the game no longer seemed that appealing. And at this point, most of the fan base was hoping for a Walking Dead game that was open world with decent combat mechanics and survival horror gameplay elements. But you should be careful what you wish for, because in return we got Overkill's The Walking Dead, a project that without a doubt disappointed everyone involved in it, to the point that it was even hard for me to find traces that this game ever even existed in the first place. And honestly, you can see why. The game had some really amazing trailers that got us all hyping into them, but it seems like that's where all the budget went instead of the gameplay. The zombies were unthreatening and the core gameplay wasn't entertaining. They tried to give a story to each individual survivor, but honestly that didn't pan out very well. And it's sad to say, because it seems this game had a lot of very good ideas, it just wasn't able to execute. And that leads us to our very last Telltale game that we have to mention, The Walking Dead, the final season. Now this was supposed to be the culmination of the entire story we'd been following since 2012. And despite a few surprises, I feel like it's safe to say that this season was the most underwhelming, because frankly nothing really happens here. Clementine finds a new boarding school filled with children and eventually begins surviving with them, only for her to run into a character from season 1, Lily, who's now a villain. And Lily spends all her free time trying to kidnap these kids so they can fight in a war or something. And that's pretty much the extent of the final season of the game. I wasn't expecting there to be a giant war or explosions or anything, but for what we got, as the very last Walking Dead game in the Telltale franchise, it's honestly disappointing. Then we have The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, and besides the Telltale game's first season, I believe these are probably the #1 contender for the best Walking Dead game. I haven't played any of them myself, but from what I've seen of them, the combat and the story is genuinely good. And unlike in the Telltale franchise, you genuinely can make any choice you want here. I've seen a lot of people choose to help every single survivor they come across, and I've also seen a lot of others try to play it like the governor. So I really do appreciate the freedom that it gives you and the love and care that obviously went into its development. However, it is solely a VR game, and I for one believe that genuinely limits not just the audience that can actually enjoy the game, but the gameplay mechanics for the experience itself. But it's not entirely trash, so I'll give it that. And finally, we have the one that all of us, well, none of us were waiting for, The Walking Dead Destinies.
My dad.
Now I first stumbled upon the trailer for this game 4 months ago, and despite the fact that it looked like it was made for PlayStation 2, I was genuinely excited to experience a Walking Dead game where you get to choose the outcome of the TV series, because ultimately that's what Destinies prides itself upon, letting players relive popular iconic moments from the show and then decide how they turn out for themselves. However, it seems that's where it ends for this game in terms of the innovation department, since the graphics are terrible, the gameplay is terrible, and ultimately none of the changes you get to make are even significant. It basically just comes down to deciding whether or not Shane will make it to season 3 and 4. Keep in mind, this game is so incredibly bad that none of the original voice actors from the show wanted to work on it. It does give you the illusion of getting to make some of the choices, but there aren't even cutscenes in the game for you to really get the feel of how they play out. There's also several bugs and clunky mechanics to the point where it's hard to even decipher what year they started development for this game. And here's what makes all of this so disappointing: the amount of potential that the Walking Dead universe has. Can you imagine a Walking Dead game like Project Zomboid with a structured campaign where you get to create your own character and survive in this universe? I mean, something like that would easily overtake DayZ in sales. But for some reason, every single attempt at a game set in this universe, for the most part, has been nothing more than a cash grab. And that's disappointing to see when there are so many people that love it genuinely, such as myself. I won't say that it's entirely impossible for us to one day get that open world survival horror Walking Dead game, but going off the way things have gone so far, it looks like it might be a long time before that happens. But that's just my take. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, and a comment below telling me how you feel. Thank you Walking Dead fans for watching. I love you. I appreciate you all. Sun God signing off.
I come in clutch like a genie. Don't talk unless you need me. You talk too much, you need it. All of my bitches look like models, she in love with me. When we link, it's flashing lights and cameras.